Welcome to the Sacred Healing Podcast, where the old is new, the ancient is innovative, and the forgotten is remembered. We believe that sacred healing is your birthright. Join us on each episode as we uniquely, authentically, and mystically dive into the bold and vulnerable life of many magical humans. From breath, spirituality, shadow work, and all things in the esoteric realm of healing, we don't leave any stone unturned on this bold journey of growth as we start to explore the remembrance of what it means to be human. So take a deep breath in and a deep breath out, and let's get sacred.
Hello, sacred beings. My guest today is a former registered nurse and massage therapist. She's what some might call a transformation junkie. She's always seeking to grow and integrate what she's learned and also to share it with others. She has over 30 years of experience with psychedelics and healing arts and over 20 years of education in transcendental philosophies. She is experienced in making sacraments, dieting with master plants. She makes herbal remedies with local medicine plants. And she's one of the coolest people I know. She has overcome addictions. She understands the complexities of setting yourself free. She has been divorced twice and blissfully married now for over 13 years and gets the struggles of creating a happy, connected partnership. She is a birth doula, a coach, a mom, a plant sacrament facilitator, an herbalist, an author, an artist, and an ordained minister. She is also an advocate for natural birth and is available for doula services, including using plant sacraments during labor to help the mother and baby work together to reduce birth trauma. She is also an author and editor of Anonymous Awakenings with Ayahuasca and is currently working on other book projects. I am so excited for you guys to hear this conversation with Shannon Hernandez of Great Spirit Farm. Welcome, everyone, to this Sacred Healing Podcast. I'm Jessica, I'm your host, and I'm here with my dear friend, Shannon. And I say dear friend because we have gotten to know each other very intimately over the past year and really over the past 6 months. And part of that has been really through diving into the deep, deep darkness in ceremony and healing together and releasing trauma together and coming through some of the most intense experiences imaginable together. And so I'm really honored to have Shannon here today. I'm so excited to chat. And I love that you're outside. I love that you're on your farm, and we'll get to that. And it's just been really a privilege to get to know you and to be in your circle and to be friends with you. You are somebody that inspires me and somebody that I look to and somebody that's a really great listener and a really great friend. So appreciate you joining and welcome, Shannon.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you.
Oh, thank you. So I want to start everyone off and we can get to kind of how we met, but we went through a pretty intense initiation recently. And
be for that.
yeah, I'm going to go right into it. And essentially so we did a sweat lodge ceremony together and it was a few months ago and it was nothing I've ever done before. It was really, really intense. And I remember kind of the retro causality moments bubbling up inside of me, and I'm getting a little bit nervous going into it. And we were kind of hanging out in a house full of other people that were going to be joining into the ceremony. And I'm like, oh man, we're going into a sweat lodge. I don't know if I want certain people to sweat on me. I was like, oh, this sounds nasty. But also really cool. So I was like, Shannon, I just remember turning to you and being like, Shannon, it would be an honor to sweat next to you because I trust your sweat, which is such a weird thing. I was like, I know your sweat is good sweat. Not that other people's sweat isn't great sweat, but I was like, no, if there's gonna
Oh,
be
I get it.
yeah,
It's so true, right?
there's gonna be somebody detoxing next to me, I was like, it's gonna be Shannon. So I just wanted to say thank you for sitting next to me in the sweat lodge. And I would love to kind of dive into the depths of what that ceremony looked like with you, and then also with Huayra, who was leading the ceremony and the space, and did just such a beautiful job of setting the container and bringing in all of like the ancestral knowledge that she has and the wisdom that she has from her teachers in Ecuador and some Peruvian cultures as well, and just the space that she was able to create there. So knowing, I was kind of setting that up, but Shannon, because you are a medicine woman yourself and a ceremony holder, I'm curious what your take was on this sweat lodge, and would love to hear how that experience was for you.
Yeah. Well, I live in Florida, so one would think that the heat would be no problem for me, but I've never taken a hot yoga class just because I'm like, fuck no. I don't want to do that. So I kind of avoid the heat. When I take vacations, I go to the cold. If it's like wintertime, I like to go where it's cold. So the sweat lodge was definitely, I had a lot of trepidation coming into it. And there was also this other part of me that was like, you're a medicine woman. You got to hold your shit together. You can't be running out of the sweat lodge, And so I kind of pictured it being like this big teepee where everybody would just be hanging out. Like there would be plenty of space. And when I saw that this thing was like 3 feet tall and 15 feet in diameter, and there was gonna be 50 people in there, I was like, oh my God. So
yeah, that was intense. That like the crunchness of space that we had. And I think our ceremony lasted like 4 hours, maybe around 3.5, 4 hours. We were crunched.
Definitely over 3.5.
Yeah.
We were crunched. And so to sit in that kind of crunched position for so long. But Jessica, what I thought was so magical is once I just closed my eyes and knew that you were next to me and had a dear friend on the other side, and I think you had a dear friend on the other, like we both kind of sandwiched ourselves in this good vibe space. It was almost easy. And maybe that's just like, when you have a baby and you look back, you're like, oh, that was no big deal, but it was like really hard in the time. Maybe I've just forgotten how hard it was. But it felt like I went into this trance state where I forgot that there were people around me. It was dark. It felt like I was in the womb. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. So I didn't have that visual perspective to create the fear of, oh my God, I can't move. And then we also have another friend that's in this group of friends of ours, and he holds sweat lodges. So I just kind of pretended I was him. I was like, I am Ken. I am strong. I've this,
yes. Strong Ken vibes. Even though he wasn't in the sweat lodge with us, I was definitely thinking about Ken, and I was like, if Ken is going to do it, I'm going to do it. Like, Ken, bring me the power. And just to set the stage too, because we talked a little bit about what a sweat lodge is, but you're right. We were in this basically contained structure that was made specifically for our sweat lodge ceremony, and it was covered with hides and blankets and all these types of kind of structural beams that were made of wood to house us into like it was almost like a mini dome, right? And it had a door in the front and a door in the back, and essentially a sweat lodge, and correct me here if I'm describing this incorrectly, but essentially a sweat lodge is a ceremony where you are, you gather in this dome, and there is a fire outside of the space where, for hours before the ceremony starts, where rocks are being essentially like heated up to high temperatures. And once you're in the ceremony space, the rocks or abuelitas, as Huayra was calling them, were brought into the space, into a like a hole in the center of the space, and then water was being poured onto those stones, water from around the world, and we can get into that as well. And then steam would come off of that. Herbs, many different things were put into the center of the space, and then essentially you would be in a steam room with high heat temperature. Did I miss anything?
No, I think the other thing that was kind of cool is they were using deer antlers to handle these higher hot rocks.
Yeah,
With great skill. Not their first rodeo for sure.
Definitely not. No, Huayra is like so amazing. She held this space so beautifully, and I felt like in full trust in my body that I was going to be able to stay in that container the entire time, with her leading it, with you next to me, with our close sisters next to us. And it felt really good to have the way that we set it up. And I don't know if this was intentional or not, but the way that we set it up was the women went into the ceremony space first and got into the container, and kind of like we crawled our way around into layers of circles. I think we had 3 layers of the circle, an outer layer, a middle layer, and then a layer that was near the middle where the hot rocks would go. And all the women were on one side, and then all the men came into the container second, and they filled out the other side, which I thought was really cool, because we had this really beautiful polarity of feminine and masculine inside the space, which just felt nice. Yeah.
You know what else was really remarkable for me is, as we were standing in line around the dome to enter, and Huayra was doing her talk about, do not cross the line between the fire and the entrance of the door. And she was describing how the fire is the masculine element, and that the lodge, the dome itself, was the feminine, the womb, and to really honor that line that connects those two spaces. As I'm feeling this nervousness of like, whoa, what have I gotten myself into? This is truly an initiation. It came over me, like the ceremony energy, for lack of a better word, like came over me, and I began to weep just standing outside of the dome, because I could feel the magic. I could feel the energy in the air, and I could feel that I was right where I needed to be. I was okay. And I could feel that energy of spirit holding me and saying, this is magic. You're going to be stronger coming out of this than going in. And you are about to transform who you are, and you got this. And I was just standing there, it just brought tears down my face. And so as we're going in, I was like, yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I can take from that experience into anything that's challenging is, I'm strong. I got this. I can get through this. It's like when you're working out and you think you've gotten to failure, it's like, no, I think I got a few more. And as soon as you mentally make that shift of, I got a few more reps in me, you got more reps than you think you even had left in you.
Yeah.
So there's really power in our mental state of knowing that life is an initiation. There's challenging experiences in all of it. And if we just pause and really see the sacredness of it and trust that we're right where we need to be, that's like a lesson for me that permeates every moment of our life.
Absolutely. I felt so held in that space too. And it was, like you mentioned earlier, it was pitch black. So it did really feel like you were being held in a womb space. And it felt like when we emerged, it was almost like a rebirth, because it was nighttime, but you could see the night sky, and the stars were lit up, and the moon was out, and we came out. It was almost like, mini darkness retreat. Like you're in the dark and you can't really see anything for hours, and then you emerge and you're so grateful. You just feel so grateful. And so one of the things about this
fresh air.
Yeah, that first breath of fresh air. And also, one of the things about the sweat lodge ceremony is that you are not allowed to have water. So that was another element that was kind of in the ceremony space, was that we were, first of all, in the middle of Texas, summer heat, and then also in this, contained fire scenario. So it was really, really hot. I don't know what the temperature was that day. I should have recorded it, but it was over 100 for sure. And it was hot.
Yeah, definitely during the day it was over 100.
Yeah, it was pretty hot.
And I would imagine inside the sweat, it had to have been over 120, 30, maybe even 150.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I've never sweated like I did there.
Yeah. It was like just puddles coming off my body.
Yeah.
But also the steam and the herbs, the frankincense and all of the like really, really beautiful herbs that Huayra was putting into that space, and blessing into the space. My body just felt so detoxed. It felt so like cleansed and pure and clean when I came out. I felt like just a really clean vessel. And because we weren't able to drink water when we were in the space, people came out of the ceremony, were like going and like trying to get their water, like chug their water. But I that wasn't me. And I don't know what your experience was, but when I came out, I didn't want to chug water. I just felt so grateful in that moment that I just wanted to like smell the fresh air and look at the sky and look at the moon before I took that like first sip of water, because it is that fast and your body gets a detox. And then you take in that first sip and it's like, like hold in your mouth, like chew on it. It was so special to take that first sip of water. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That whole moment was very savory. Coming out, just looking around, it had that like twilight effect. The moon was full in the sky overhead. And I have a very special relationship with the moon. I think a lot of people do. And I just remember standing there looking at her with my hands on my heart, just like, wow, I did that. I did. And just breathing that crisp, cool air. It felt really cool compared to what we just came in. And yeah, but that first sip of water was, and it was in a cooler. So I don't know about yours, but I got it out of the ice chest. So it almost felt a little shocking, like I didn't want to swallow it right away.
Yeah. Mine was in the ice cooler as well. Yeah, it was such a beautiful experience. If you would want to share, I would love to hear kind of like what was going on for you during that experience. Like what emotions, what visions, what came to you, or what insights did you gather from that ceremony?
Yeah. So we already touched on the strength. And I think, just to kind of recapitulate that, I think that there's a lot of power in drawing from our idea of someone else's strength. So just any time that I felt like, oh my God, I can't do this, or I need to get cool, or how much longer, when the mental chatter goes on, I just kept remembering Ken. Like I just pulled from his strength. And I would be really curious to know, like, if someone could be tapped in at that moment and feel that, or is that really just all coming from within myself, within my own psyche? So that was something that I found really profound, is pulling from my idea of someone else's strength. When I went into the sweat lodge that week, and this is a kind of a theme that I feel like happens for so many people in so many varieties of ceremonies, is the days, weeks, month or so leading up to the ceremony, stuff starts to come up. Things start happening, things that are not laid to rest or settled start to, if they haven't come to the surface, they're going to resurface or come to the surface. And so for me, I had a situation come up that week that had kind of been bubbling for a couple of years with a family that I consider to be very special to me and that I love and I admire and respect. And there was some issue in the relationship. And so I was supposed to talk to one of the members of the family that day, and they weren't able to answer their phone. And so I was like, I'm not getting clarity here today. So I'm going to bring this into the sweat. And there was a question of not necessarily right or wrong, but really like trusting my heart and the guidance that I've received along the way. And about halfway, maybe a third of the way through the sweat, Wydra starts to divinely channel an answer to a text message that I had gotten from a member of this family, even using the same words that they used. And like words like originality and authenticity and copyright, like things, that were very, very specific. And it resonated with me, and it answered the question that I had. And it was the thing that she was saying didn't feel like it would necessarily apply to everyone in the sweat lodge. It felt very personal and very specific to me. And I just began to cry. I began to cry, and just like those tears of truth, tears of feeling seen by the universe, feeling held, feeling like, yeah, these steps that I've taken to honor my heart and to follow my truth have been accurate. It wasn't just me on my ego trip, going wherever I think I want to go, because that's very important to me, that I do honor the sacred, that I do honor the divine, and that I don't try to do something of my own accord, that I am the hollow bone and I'm being guided in that. And so to hear Wydra say that was so profound. And I went up to her afterwards and I just said, something that you said tonight felt like a direct message from God. And it helped to clear a concern I have between me and my mentors. And she just looked me in the eye and she said, trust your heart, trust your heart. And so that was really the big, profound message that I got. And I still know that people, I do this in ceremony. I sing a song that I've never sang before, and somebody will come up to me later and say, wow, that song was incredible. Never heard it before. And I'm like, yeah, I don't even know what I was singing, but it was for them. And so I feel like the sweat ceremony was so powerful. And the herbs that the smell and the herbs that she was creating, it was alchemy. It was magic. It was ineffable. It was indescribable. And I think that a lot of people got whatever their intention or their question was. And if they went in and didn't know, that they got something they weren't expecting. It was such a beautiful experience.
Yeah, indescribable is definitely the word for it, because we're trying to put it into words here, but it was such a unique experience. And thank you for sharing your insights. So powerful. And I want to touch on too, Huayra was singing these chants and songs, and it was just so beautiful. Like you said, you were brought to tears. The whole entire ceremony was so beautiful. And all of that bubbling up of emotion and stuff, before coming into the ceremony, I had a similar experience where, things that I was seeking were answered there for me, because I was more in touch with my own intuition and was able to almost like self-guide from there. So it felt really, really resonant. And yeah, I'm so glad we went through that experience together, because it brought us closer, and also, now leads us here today to talk more about it. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And big shout out to Huayra for leading that ceremony space and just making it really authentic to her culture and to how she runs sweat lodges. It was so unique. Highly recommend.
Yeah. If anyone ever gets to sit with Huayra in a ceremony, do it.
It's a yes.
She is such a powerhouse.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
a powerhouse. She's a very strong woman.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to kind of float to from here is that you're also a medicine woman in your own right, and a very powerful human being, at least in my eyes, an inspirational human being. And I want to talk about kind of how you got to that space, like what called you to be this alchemist of energies, what called you to walk this life. And I'd love to hear kind of details as to how you got where you are today.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this, it's my life story. So this could be, I'll try to keep it succinct, but a little bit of background about me is I used to be a registered nurse, and I worked in the perioperative setting, starting IVs, getting people ready for surgery, working in recovery, sending them home. And so I've always had a heart and a desire to work with people in their moments of need, whether it's a physical need or an emotional need. I've really always had a heart for that. And I left nursing and went into massage therapy. I have a little bit of a rebel archetype. I didn't do well taking doctor's orders, and I didn't want to go back. I thought I might want to be a nurse anesthetist. And when I was a little kid, I had dreams of being a heart surgeon, which I'll hopefully remember to circle back to. But and then I ended up in insurance, of all places, and that's been a beautiful detour as well. So during the insurance phase of my life, I met my current husband, and I was at a wedding. And one of my friends was talking about his DMT experience, and I'd never heard of DMT. And I've used psychedelics like LSD and psilocybin since I was in my teenage years. So I was like, whoa, there's a psychedelic I haven't tried. I got to try that. And my friend said, well, when you're ready, it'll find you. And I was a little offended, to be honest. I was like, what do you mean? You just told me you guided this person. I'll probably have it in your back pocket right now. Like, come on. But I took his word, and I went home and told my husband about it. And we weren't married at the time, but we started doing some research, and through that I learned, like, oh, well, there's the smokable DMT, and then there's oral DMT like ayahuasca. And that ayahuasca is two plants mixed together. One of them is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, an MAOI, and that actually allows your body to orally process the DMT or the tryptamines that you can take in orally, so you don't have to smoke it. And it makes the experience, instead of a 15-minute smoked experience, it's now a 4 to 6 hour longer journey, and not taking all that and cramming it into 15 minutes where you can actually like float with that experience and have time to absorb it and work with it. And it was about 5 years later, after we'd done our research, that he says to me one day, my husband says to me, hey, like ayahuasca hasn't found us. And so I've got the plant in my cart. We'll just order the plant and we'll make our own. Like, we didn't know what the hell we were talking about. We were just like, yeah, we grow plants. We were into permaculture. We were into gardening and stuff. And so we were like, we'll just order the plant and we'll make our own. I was like, yeah, sure, go for it, buy it. He didn't end up buying it. The next day, one of my good girlfriends calls me and she says, hey, we're in South Florida. Do you want to join a ceremony in next week? And I was like, yes, absolutely, I do. And so within a week, I was doing my first ayahuasca ceremony. And because I'd done the research, I knew that this wasn't like taking LSD or psilocybin, and I wasn't going to be just recreationally hanging out. I already had my list of intentions. And at the time, I had asthma, and I'd had asthma since I was 20. It just popped up overnight while I was in college. And that was my primary intention, was to heal my lungs and to figure out why I had asthma. And so through this series of my first ceremonies, that being my primary intention, the answers that I was getting didn't feel specific to my lungs. I can see now in hindsight that they were, but plant medicines often kind of work in a roundabout way. They're not always a straight linear path that we expect or want.
Hello, sacred humans. Quickly, I want to share with you something I've added into my daily rituals that has me buzzing, and that is Rise Mushroom Coffee. Rise entered my life through my Instagram algorithm that obviously knows what products I like, and I gave it a try, and just wow, it has amazingly delicious flavor. Not only this, they also have a mushroom matcha powder. Phew, mind blown. And they're filled with superfoods and super mushrooms. What I like about Rise is that they use 100% organic ingredients, and their mushroom farms are located in California. If you've always wanted to try mushroom coffee but haven't yet pulled the trigger, this is your moment. And there is zero risk because they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're interested in the deliciousness of Rise mushroom elixirs, head to the show notes and you will find a link for 20% off your first order. Or simply use the discount code Jessica, all caps, at checkout. That's JESSICA, all caps, at checkout. And now, let's get back to our amazing episode of the Sacred Healing Podcast.
And it was probably my 10th ceremony or so. I saw my husband facilitating a ceremony, and like wearing white, playing the flute, people, laying on the ground as he walked around and played around them. And I was like, "Oh, babe, you're supposed to be an ayahuasca facilitator." And he was like, "Oh, okay," And so we told our mentors, and they were like, "Yeah, just keep drinking the medicine, keep working on yourself and healing yourself." And so somewhere along that place, I realized that I didn't really like what I was doing. I didn't want to sell insurance anymore. It wasn't my heart. And I felt like I might want to go into herbalism and use my nursing experience and my nursing healthcare background and combine it with plants. But I didn't really want to go to an herb study course. I wanted to just learn about the plants that were actually in my bioregion, like my yard. And so somewhere around that time, we were actually looking to buy property, and we thought we were just going to be hermits and go live out in the middle of the woods and live off grid and, forget about society and not be bothered by the everyday, honking horns and garbage trucks backing up and just that noise of society. And we've been looking in this neighborhood for about 3 years. And I kept asking ayahuasca, which property is it? Which one is it? She said, "You'll know when you see it." And one day I saw this property and I was like, I've seen that property in a vision in my ceremony before. And we called the realtor, and that whole ceremony is a whole other story if you want to dive into that one later. But we called the realtor, and I knew that this was the property. She was absolutely right. You would know when you see it. And so we bought the property. We had no intention of serving ayahuasca anytime soon, but we did think we could have some yoga retreats or some meditation retreats while we continued to develop ourselves. And at the time, I was still thinking I would not be facilitating ayahuasca. It would be my husband. But what I've learned along the way is that ayahuasca tells you what you need to hear, not necessarily what's exactly true. Are you familiar with the Oracle in the Matrix?
Yes.
When Morpheus takes Neo to see the Oracle in the first movie, and she's hands him a cookie, and she's like, "Sorry, kid, you're not the one. Don't worry about the vase." And she's like, "What vase?" And he turns and knocks over this vase. But that act of her saying, "Sorry, kid, you're not the one," was what allowed him to release attachment so that he could just live as if he didn't have anything to lose. There was nothing on the line for him. And so her telling me that I'm not the one, it's my husband, allowed me to just kind of go with the flow and let things arise. So we bought this property, and we thought we might be facilitating ayahuasca at some point in the future. And we ended up running into challenges with our neighbors. And they were not of the same mindset as us. And it's kind of like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole was moving into this neighborhood. We're on 20 acres up next to a state forest. It's a beautiful space. And we thought, we have 20 acres, like we're not going to bother anyone here. But we seemed to be bothering them just by purely existing. And so the first couple, we had a yoga retreat, we had a silent retreat, some meditation retreats, and then they called the county and they got us shut down. And so there was about 2 years where, and we had just quit our full-time insurance job. And so we didn't have any income. We just had our renewal income with insurance. And now we couldn't hold retreats or have the public on our property. And I was so angry. And I just remember asking, like, what is the lesson here? Like, what am I supposed to work on? Because everything is from within. And the message that I received was, love your neighbor like yourself. And so I spent about 2 years every day practicing my instruments and sending love to my neighbors and transmuting that anger that I felt toward them for, calling the county and we had so many legal expenses and fees and challenges and code enforcement. There was like just so much drama all wrapped up in it. And so, long story short, during that time, I started, this might sound strange to your listeners, but because of my relationship with ayahuasca, and we were drinking ayahuasca and going to ceremony about once a month, I started to have plants talking to me. And I had trees being like, hey, come here, come here, come here. I'm medicine. So there was like sections of the property we weren't really maintaining. And I would just look at these weeds and think, oh my gosh, this is so hideous. I got to mow this. And I would hear the words, don't mow me. And I was just like, what is going on? Like these plants are speaking to me. And lo and behold, like I would go look up that plant and it'd be like, oh yeah, this has been used for this, this, and this, and in the Caribbean for, many, many years, or this plant is well known to have these scientific properties. And so even on WebMD, I would look stuff up and it would be like, so just out there in the public. And so I began to kind of trust that intuition that there was some relationship here with these plants. And slowly but surely, I did begin to develop a relationship with each of the plants that I was working with, and combining that with my medical nursing knowledge. I didn't go to herbalism school, but I began to really connect with the plants that live on our property and make tinctures from them and make teas from them and market them. And I was going to farmers markets, and this is kind of how we supported ourselves during those few years where we weren't able to have retreats. And doing a lot of my own ceremonies, because I really believe that for me to be able to hold space for someone else, I have to be clear. I have to be the hollow bone. And I expected that it would be like 10 years before I would ever be ready to hold space in a ceremony for someone. But I was in a mushroom ceremony one day by myself, and just out of the blue, I heard the medicine say, you're ready to facilitate for friends and family only, 1 or 2 people at a time. And I wasn't asking, I wasn't looking for it. It was just kind of out of the blue. And so that's pretty much how we've grown. And at the time, my husband had another job. So he was like, you got this. Why don't you facilitate the ceremony? And it was just 1 or 2 people. So that's kind of how I got started. And then a few years later, we were in Brazil brewing medicine with the UDV, the União Vegetal Church in Brazil. And they were all asking me, why aren't you why aren't you facilitating yet? And I wasn't looking for that. I didn't have that as a question on my radar. But I was like, wow, these 5 or 6 people asked me this all in one trip, completely unrelated, unsolicited. And then we came home and we had a psilocybin ceremony set up for a friend and his friend, 2 people. And I went to test the medicine and it was a dud. The psilocybin was not active. So I called him and I said, hey, psilocybin's a dud. And he's like, you got ayahuasca? And I said, actually, I do. I just came back from brewing it in Brazil. And he's like, let's drink ayahuasca. And so it was like all of these threads of the universe giving me this message that I was ready. And that was about 7 years ago. So here we are.
That's how you became a wizard.
Yeah. So just luck of the plants.
Yeah, and thank you for listening to that calling and listening to that deeper knowing and listening to those plants. I want to talk about some of the tinctures you've created. Today, I want to share with you all the delicious cacao with a K, ceremonial grade drinking chocolate. Cacao is one of my favorite brands of ceremonial grade cacao, and it's a delicious addition to my morning routine. Cacao is jam-packed with delicious nutrients that work with my body to stay energized and connected and focused. What I also love about cacao is that they are a nonprofit on a mission to protect the native heirloom strands of cacao in Peru and Guatemala by giving back to the farmers and communities that make it available for us. If you are interested in cacao with a K, go to the show notes and you will find a link for 10% off your first order, or simply by using the discount code Jessica, all caps, at checkout. That's JESSICA, all capital letters, at checkout. Okay, we took a quick pause and now we are back, and we are here to talk about tinctures and all the beautiful things that Shannon has created in her herbal life and in her way of doing alchemy. And so Shannon has created this wonderful tincture that I've had the pleasure and honor of taking in and doing kind of my own little mini ceremony with. And Shannon, I would love for you to describe what that tincture is for everyone, and then we can talk about kind of what it's all about, what it does, how it makes you feel, and then like my personal experience as well, which I'd love to share.
Yeah, so we kind of stumbled across the idea of using ayahuasca as a microdose about 5 years ago, because we were making medicine on the property and we had lots of vine, but we didn't have a lot of the chacruna, the DMT source. And so we decided to brew them separately. And we had a whole bunch of just vine only mixture. And we had some volunteers that were staying with us at the time. And we decided that we were all just going to take like 1 ounce to 2 ounces of this ayahuasca vine only part without the DMT. We had the most amazing time that night. We all sat around, we were super connected, we were diving deep, we were asking the most incredible questions that were just really opening up the conversation, giggling, laughing, feeling open, vulnerable, warm-hearted, connected. And I realized this is really good. This is something really special. Like, what if we could bring this to people on so many levels? Like, we could bring it to people who are depressed, people who have anxiety. We could bring it to people who want to get off their pharmaceutical antidepressants, or specifically for people who want to come to ceremony, they can't be on antidepressants. So we were able to kind of start giving it to people who were coming for ceremony as a way to stay connected after their retreat. And then we started sending it to people pre-ceremony to use in conjunction with the advice of their physician to wean off of their antidepressant and slowly titrate up on this microdose. And the feedback was phenomenal. We were like, wow, this is really good. And so we've just kind of been under the radar. We've had it on our website. We haven't really promoted it or marketed it. And bringing it as a sample to the event we were at together in May was the first time that I've been able to give someone a sample and receive direct feedback, because we had people buy it from the retreat, take it home, but they would keep buying it, but they would never give us direct feedback. Or people would find it on our website. We maybe had an order a week, 4 tinctures a month we were sending out. It wasn't anything extraordinary. So to have people come up the next day at this retreat that we were at together and say with like wide eyes and a big smile on their face, like, I had the most amazing experience last night, and I can only attribute it to this tincture that you gave me. So yeah, it's an ayahuasca microdose. It's just the vine. There's no DMT. It's totally legal. It comes in a 2-ounce bottle, so you can put it in your carry-on. I travel with it all the time. And unlike microdosing other substances, you don't have to take a break in between because your body doesn't build a tolerance to it. So you can take it every day. I put it next to my morning beverage, wherever I'm going to make my coffee or tea that morning. And it creates consistency. So for a lot of people who are microdosing, if they're using psilocybin or LSD, they might have that day that they do the microdose, that day, the next day, like really good. Like, wow, I had a really good day, but they have to come off of it so they don't build a tolerance. And then the next day or so, it's like an ordinary day. Whereas with the ayahuasca microdose, they could do it every single day. So then we took it to the Psychedelic Science Conference in June in Denver, which was we were just so blown away. It was the largest psychedelic gathering ever in history, apparently, and the largest convention ever held at the Denver Convention Center. And we gave away samples. And we had people run the gamut from standing there in front of us, people who are sensitive like you, who would put it in their mouth and then their eyes would get wide and they'd be like, oh, wow, I feel it. And then people who would come back an hour later and buy a bottle, or people who would come back the next day. There was one particular woman that just brought tears to my eyes. She came on a Wednesday, bought the bottle, came back on Friday just before the convention closed. And she's like, I just need to tell you what this has done for me. She said, I have been on Xanax for every day of my life, the last 10 years of my life. I have been having to use Xanax because of severe anxiety. And here we are at a convention that's got 12,000 people, and she's around all these people. And she said, the last 3 days, I have not taken any Xanax. I've taken this tincture and I feel fantastic. I have felt comfortable in my own skin around all these people in this big convention center with all this energy going on. And I don't need to take that anymore. I don't need to take Xanax anymore. And my husband and I I could cry now. Like, we just started crying, we're like all 3 of us standing there crying. So it's a really powerful plant. And it is the MAOI, the antidepressant. And there are also pharmaceutical MAOIs out there. The main difference with ayahuasca is that it's actually called a reversible MAOI. It's an RIMA, reversible inhibitor of monoamines. And so what that means is that you can't take too much. And if you did take too much, your body would just start to excrete it. It doesn't absorb it. Whereas with a pharmaceutical MAOI, you can take too much.
Wow. So first of all, thank you for sharing all that. And that's very helpful knowledge on the pharmaceutical realm versus this tincture. And of course, not everything is for everyone, but I think that the stories that you're hearing are so powerful, and it is changing people's lives for the better. And my experience with the tincture is, I'm the biggest skeptic. I'm going to question everything, especially things that I'm putting in my body. I'm very particular about diet and health and wellness and what is going in my body and what is being put on my body. Very, very sensitive to pretty much all substances. Like I'll have one sip of alcohol and I can feel it immediately going through my entire body. Very, very like in tune with what enters my space. And so I was very, very skeptical, Shannon. I was like, I don't know. And I've never done ayahuasca, and I've never sat in ceremony with that plant or with psilocybin for that matter. So I was like, wow, I haven't really dabbled in plant medicines, and I don't know if this is really for me. And you said, well, let's just do like a half a microdose, like a microdose, and see what happens. And the way that we administered that, we had like a mini ceremony. So thank you for like holding the space for me there. We kind of had like a 1-to-1 mini ceremony. And I said a quick intention and like prayer for what I wanted to get from that night. And we did just like a tiny little bit under my tongue of the tincture. I held it for as long as I could. It was, to me, it actually tastes really good. It's like kind of licoricey and like it's like molassesy almost. And I actually really liked the flavor. Most people are probably like, oh, that's nasty, but I liked it. And then swallowed and sat with it for a little bit, and then we ended up coming back around to each other maybe an hour later. And what was coming through in like, we had a pretty deep conversation in a circle of 3-4 women, and what was coming through was like this higher intelligence and higher intuition. And the way that you described the tincture to me was like, it's gonna make you feel unfuckwithable. And love that word. And I was like, yes, okay, so unfuckwithable, that's cool with me. I'm down for that. But it really did. I don't know if there's like any other word I could use to describe it, because it really helped me get in tune with a higher intelligence, block out all the noise, and the things that were flowing through in our conversation I knew were truth. Like I was like, oh, I'm so connected to myself and my intuition that I know that what I'm saying is true and it's authentic for me. And that's how it made me feel. It didn't really feel like anything other than that. It was just
Right.
It was just that. It's not, inhibiting in any way. And like you said, you can take it every day. It's very calming, but also it helped me get in touch with what I would call like a higher intelligence of myself, and helped to channel that in a way that I hadn't been able to for a while. So it really helped me connect and ground in that way. So I wanted to share that experience with you because it was really, really powerful. And for people that are out there that are like skeptical or haven't dabbled in plant medicines and maybe don't want to dabble in plant medicines or haven't felt that call, this tincture is a really, really great alternative for stress, anxiety reduction, and really just like feeling really, really in tune with yourself. I almost like attune it to like an alpha brain or, something, some similar, like that gets you like really in tune with your higher self and higher intelligence. And so it's really helped me, with speaking engagements when I have to get in front of crowds of thousands of people and speak, or if I'm about to lead a breathwork ceremony, I want to be like in this space where nothing else bothers me and I'm totally in tune with what needs to flow through from the universe, from whatever. And that's what it's brought for me. So I just want to say thank you. And yeah, I don't know if you have any insights from me sharing that experience, but that's what it's brought for me, particularly.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that is a very accurate way to describe it. And I can also say that for some people, their experience is similar but different. So some of the reports that we get from people is it's like a warm hug, that they just feel so calm and okay where they don't normally feel okay in their own skin. Some people say that their dreams go off the chart, that their intuition is really amplified. We actually just got an email from someone last week that said that she was taking it for the anti-inflammatory properties, and that she's already a medium. She already has very heightened intuition. She didn't need that, but that it really amplified that even more for her in a profound way that she wasn't expecting. And it was really beautiful. So the intuition piece, the dream piece is a big part of it. And then I think just for people who maybe that's not important for, feeling calm and comfortable and relaxed in their own skin and being able to go through their day. In our world, there's so much that people confront in our world, whether it's politics or family strain or stress, uncertainty, financial crisis. There's a lot that people are carrying around with them all the time, and we can kind of get used to that. And some of us don't really get used to it, though. Some of us just feel like we're kind of at our wits' end. So it's a great tool for people to be able to kind of be, like you said, uncomfortable with going through their daily life. We have a firefighter paramedic who takes it, and she loves it because it's legal. She can take it with her to work, and she's not as stressed out in her everyday job. She does the best she can, and she goes to the call, and but she doesn't take that stress back home with her. So it is really just incredible. So thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for trusting me. Normally if someone's like, no, I'm not sure about that, I'm like, okay, absolutely, honor your heart. But I guess for some whatever reason, I'm like, just try just a little bit,
No, I
And
was in total trust of you, and that we weren't really close then. And through that experience, we become closer and closer, and we really connected in Montana. And so I just, yeah, for there was a knowing inside myself that your intentions were not to sway me in any one way or the other. Your intentions were so pure, and the decision was mine. And then in that, and you mentioned dreams as well. I had through like once we left the container that we were in, and I was kind of by myself integrating the night. I definitely had vivid dreams, but I also had like almost like that higher intelligence clarity of thought voice come to me, and it was almost like I was second guessing myself. It was that voice of like, who the fuck do you think you are to like be the type of person that is like thinks they're so cool that they can just, take this tincture. Like it was like I was like myself was talking to myself. And then like another voice came in and was like, no, like fuck you. Like that was that gave you clarity of thought, and like it was just this no, and again, like it's nothing that I can describe really in words, but it was like a competing like devil on the shoulder, angel on the shoulder voices were like competing inside my head with each other, and it was speaking to me. And then I came out of it knowing that I had made a decision that was right for my intuition, and it was the right decision to make. And then I had clarity on a lot of the things that I was asking in my intention, and came out of that with the clarity of even having conversations that I needed to have with people in my life. And it may have been like a conglomerate of things that happened in our ceremony space and plus tincture. But it was a really beautiful outcome. And I actually felt like that the tincture or the plants that were in the tincture were talking to me, that they were like, yo, what's up? Just having a conversation, which was really cool. And I hadn't really experienced that before. So yeah, that was really beautiful. And thank you for being that medicine woman that you are, and being so fluid and authentic, because that's so important.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You are
what I'm
a wizard. Yeah, you are a wizard, a magician. You are all the things. An alchemist, everything. And so, for people that are wondering and curious, what can you describe what else is in that tincture? Like, what are they? What like? How does that come to be? How do you make that? Do you make it on the farm? Where do you sell it? How can people maybe find your tinctures?
Yeah, so it's a local ayahuasca vine that's over 25 years old that's growing here on the west central coast of Florida. And another just beautiful synchronicity, it doesn't grow on our farm, but it grows about an hour from us a little further south. And I found this vine by my daughter's teacher assistant when she was at Montessori in 8th grade. And somehow we got talking about ayahuasca, and she's like, yeah, I have a 20-year-old ayahuasca vine growing on my property that my husband planted there 20 years ago, and she's never done ayahuasca. But it's like an invasive plant. And so she is grateful that we go and we harvest it and we cut it back so that her yard looks normal again. And we bring it back to the farm and we say prayers and we brew it just like we would the sacrament. Lots of prayers, lots of song, lots of good energy, very guarded, protected space so that there's no dissonance or just unharmonious energy around when we're brewing that medicine. And it's proprietary, but it literally is nothing more than ayahuasca vine, water, and a organic corn-based alcohol vodka to preserve it. We use as little vodka as we can. We've kind of played with the ratios to figure out just how much is needed so that it can sit on someone's shelf, for a year or so. It's supposed to be good for 3 years, but I don't know of anybody who's sit on the shelf for more than a year. But yeah, that's it. Just those three ingredients. Yeah. But
Yeah.
lots of love in there.
Yeah.
So, and prayers.
Yeah, thank you for that. And totally legal, which is amazing because it
Totally legal.
doesn't have the DMT in it. And I appreciate that too, because you know, not everyone wants to go and sit in ceremony all the time and have that like intense experience. So the microdose is really, really cool. And I haven't heard of anyone else doing it. So I'm really grateful for you. I also wanted to connect on you're a creator, you're an entrepreneur, first of all, and you're sitting on your beautiful farm that everyone can see, and it's so gorgeous. I'm here with a fake plant. It's cool too, but yeah, it's so beautiful to see the wildlife behind you and for you to actually be on the farm for this podcast. You're a creator, you're a creatrix in general, and you've started to play around with not only tinctures and teas, but you've also started to play around with listening to the plants on the farm and starting to do dietas. And so I wanted to chat with you about and actually I think you might have just come off of another dieta. So I would love to. Oh yeah, okay. I can't wait to hear about it. This is like all new information for me. Because we haven't caught up since your last dieta. But I want to hear about the first dieta you did. And then let's talk about this second one, because I would love for the listeners to hear about kind of what that process was like for you, how you decided to do that, how it came to you. And then let's get into all the goodness.
Yeah, so I think that this particular dieta that I have done most recently, these past two, are a little different than my previous dietas, in that the idea came to me when we had a guest maestra Lila Sanchez from the Peruvian. She's a Shipibo maestra. And she's one of the very few women maestras in the Shipibo lineage. And she was here in March leading ceremony. And I was kind of half half assistant, half participant. I was kind of had my eyes and ears available in case I was needed, but I wasn't. And so I just kind of went deep. And it was funny because the first, as I mentioned earlier, plants and trees began to talk to me when I started drinking ayahuasca. The very first tree that ever spoke to me came to me in the ceremony and said, I want you to do a dieta. I want it to be on these dates, very specific dates, 5 days. The first day, you're going to drink ayahuasca. You're going to dry fast for 3 days. And then you're going to drink ayahuasca on the 5th day. And this is the dieta. And I'm also a birth doula. And so I had one of my clients was due during that time. And I was like, I can't just go be off my phone drinking ayahuasca in the woods, talking to trees when this client might call. But I trusted it. And her baby actually came 10 days early. And so I didn't have to worry about her going into labor. But the next day after this ceremony, when this tree came and told me this, with the ceremony that Maestro Lila was guiding, I asked her the next day. She asked me how my ceremony was, and I said, I got this message from this tree that I was supposed to do this dieta in this way. And she said, oh, yes, this is how I do it. This is, the shamans will sit with these plants, and maybe your listeners don't know what a traditional dieta is, but it's basically when a person goes and they just create and cultivate relationship with one plant. It's like a new beginning. You meet your love and you go on dates and you talk on the phone. It's kind of like that phase of that relationship where you're like, I want to get to know you better, and I'm going to exclude the whole rest of the world so that I can understand who you are and what you're all about. And so this process has been done by the traditional indigenous people for how I don't know how many years, maybe thousands of years. But what it typically has looked like is they'll go and be away from their family. They'll eat a very bland diet of like rice and plantains and fish, no salt, no communication, no contact, no sexual intercourse, just very strict, sacrificial, giving up all pleasure in life and focusing on this plant. And what my maestra said is that doing this dieta with the ceremony, 3 days of dry fasting, followed by a final ayahuasca ceremony, was equal to a year of dieting the plant in the normal traditional fashion, where they would still eat, but eat very limited diet. And so to have it confirmed the very next day, I was like, oh, wow, this is legit. And these dates are legit. And so that was my first time doing this diet in this kind of different way. And it blew my socks off. The plant was the oak tree, and it's one of the first plants that ever spoke to me. And it has told me that it's medicine over the years. And it's actually, the oak bark is one of the ingredients in a chai tea that we make that we sell on our website, along with the microdose tincture. And it's anti-inflammatory, it's astringent, it's got all these beautiful properties that even WebMD lists them. But the gifts that this oak tree gave me are, and I don't feel like I am at liberty to really like podcast it out to the world, but I can tell you that it's superhero movie type stuff. It's like, I'm still blown away that what happened actually happened, and that I was given this gift. And it's an energetic gift that I have as a tool in my toolbox to use when I'm conducting and facilitating ceremony and moving through life and interacting with people. And it's a very powerful tool. And it's just incredible. I can't describe it, but just imagine, a Marvel movie or a DC comic movie, and how each character has their their magical tool that they have. I feel like I got a magical tool like that, like Doctor Strange and his cape, like I'm not flying with my cape, obviously, but it was pretty far out and pretty incredible. And so the 3 days of dry fasting is no joke. It's definitely challenging. And it's worth every moment. And so I think the biggest takeaway that I can share is that plants are not what we think that they are, at least on the surface. Yeah, we can take this plant and make a medicine from it. And this plant, it's good for cleaning, or, we can eat this plant. But there is a wisdom and an infinite connection to source through these plants that is far beyond anything that we could imagine.
Ooh, okay. So much to unpack there. I always knew you were Wonder Woman. I was like, what is it? It's the oak. Thank you for giving us a snippet of that. And I can attest that a dry fast for 5 days is very hard, because I recently just did a water fast and that was hard for me. So dry fast, yeah, that's next level. I don't know if there's any.
I'll interject.
Yeah.
I will say that I think, from my experience, a water fast is harder because you're continuing the cycle through the digestive system by adding water. It continues to reignite that hunger. Oh, there's something in my belly. Oh, but I can't eat that. At least that's my experience. I think dry fasting can be easier.
Really? Okay. Well, I have not done it, so I will take your word for it. But yeah, I did that 3-day water fast, and I was following this woman, Dr. Mindy, who I love, and she's a fasting expert, and was following kind of her cycle of fasting, or her way to fast. And yeah, I was I was struggling there for a moment. But yeah, back to the dieta. Thank you for sharing all of that. For just out of curiosity, and you and I have talked about this, but for the people that are listening, when you're doing a dieta with an oak tree, are you consuming the bark? I know you said you currently put it into a tea, but is there any type of consumption, or are you touching, smelling? What is the relation that you have? And is it like an internal relation or an external relation that you're having with the oak tree?
I think that every plant is different. Specifically with the oak tree, I did make a tea. It was like a 32-ounce mason jar of the tea, just the water and just the bark, and I filtered it. There was no flavoring, no honey, anything like that, because it's very, very bitter by itself. And I took it out with me, and the first day I drank it before and after my ayahuasca ceremony. And then the next morning, I thought, well, I'm dry fasting, but I'll just take just a little sip each day to continue that connection. And the oak tree was like, that's not dry fasting.
Damn! It called
you
out.
It totally called me out. And so I was like, okay, got it. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And so I just set it aside. And then on my third day, about 3 or 4 hours prior to when I was going to end my 72 hours of dry fasting, it said to me, you can have a sip of the tea. And so I just kind of sipped a little bit.
You're like, are you sure?
To the heart.
Take it back?
Yeah. Making sure I don't do anything wrong, because I definitely want to be in full reverence and full honor of what that's supposed to look like. When I just did my dieta with the cedar tree, I didn't make a tea because I felt like I'm supposed to be dry fasting. Maybe I'm not really supposed to have that. And then at the end of my dieta, the cedar tree gave me this recipe, which I do feel like I can share. It's a purifying. So cedar is, it is pristine, and it is a purification. It can be used for protection, but it also told me that it can internally purify us and to make a tea, a pungent tea, so very strong tea with the leaves, and to drink it twice a day for 3 days, and to create this tea this way. So my cedar dieta, I didn't drink any tea, but I did play with the branches. I played with the bark. I played with the leaves. I smelled them. It told me to go on a walk, and I found a whole grove of cedar trees on a part of my property that I didn't know existed. I just was kind of going where I felt like it was telling me to go. And one of the trees said, "Here, take this branch." And so I took a bunch of wood back. I made a fire. I burned this beautiful cedar wood and kind of bathed myself in this beautiful aromatic smoke. I mean, cedar, it's just such an aromatic wood. And I began to get a song. So I also, in the dietas, I get the ikros, or I get the songs I will then later sing in ceremony, or sometimes I sing them to myself in certain aspects of life where I feel like that vibration is needed to transmute whatever's going on in me or around me with the people around me. And as I'm playing with this branch, I'm whittling it with my pocket knife, and I'm taking the little tiny branches off and making it smooth, and just kind of making this smooth branch, and the song's coming through me. And the song was all about having vision to see the truth inside of ourselves. And as I'm working with this, I got the message to wash it. And I had cleaned all the little side branches off, made it smooth, and then I washed it in water, and the bark began to fall away. And the heart core of that branch, the truth is how I saw it metaphorically, began to shine. And it was this, the outside bark's kind of a greenish, grayish brown, but underneath was this golden amber cedar color. And it just smelled so amazing. And the whole song that came through me while I was working with this branch about truth, whittling away towards the truth, peeling back the layers toward the truth, came through the action of working with this branch and being very in contact, literal and physical contact with this branch. So I think that every dieta is unique. Every plant is unique. Sometimes I will ingest the plant. Sometimes I don't. But it's a moment by moment checking in with the heart process about what does that plant want me to do in that moment.
Wow. And with your cedar dieta, what were you called to diet with cedar? Like what was the call towards that next plant? Did that come to you in ceremony? Was it specific, like the first time where you got dates? How did you get called to that next tree, essentially?
Yeah, great question. It actually came from my dieta with the oak tree. It gave me the next 3 plants. It said, you're going to do this one, and then this one, and then this one. I thought that I would be doing the cedar dieta late August, but things just kept coming up. And then when I would check in, I was like, no, it's not time. And then we were facilitating ceremony, and I asked, and I got the exact dates. And it just worked out on my calendar. I had nothing planned, and it was bookended by other things that I did have commitments to. So yeah, so I think that just comes through the plant. Here's the next step.
Yeah, and are you able to share the other 2 plants?
The next one I'm going to be doing is tobacco, which I think that for a lot of people, they would think that's the first one. But for me, I have a relationship with tobacco. I have sat with tobacco. I feel like I've done a kind of dieta with tobacco, but not this type, not this structure that has been new. And then after that is rose. So, and we don't have any roses growing on the property, so I'm excited to bring that energy onto the retreat center space.
That sounds fabulous. That
Mm-hmm.
sounds very like uber masculine and then like uber feminine too. It's like that
Yeah,
tobacco and then the rose.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't know Rose that well, but I imagine it's probably like our local version of Bovensana, that heart, love energy. We'll find out. I'll find out.
You'll find out. And the creatrix that you are, I cannot wait to see what other teas and other things come out of all of this, or don't come out of all of this, because you've got a lot of just like your herbalist nature in general, like your intuition of being an herbalist, and then also a medicine woman, and then also an entrepreneur. I feel like all those things kind of mix into this beautiful concoction of being able to create these tinctures and teas that are helpful for other people. Um, One other thing I wanted to touch on with you in this same vein is you've also started kind of going down this line of potentially creating supplements for women. So I wanted to see kind of where are you with that? What's going on with that, and what are those, and how did you get into that space? Because you mentioned
Mhm.
you are a doula of sorts. And so I know that you're really powerful in the space of initiating women into motherhood. But also, I think you're dabbling in the space of initiating women into the space of um, kind of aging. And so I wanted to touch on that and double click on that for a moment if you're willing to share.
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of a funny story. Aging, I don't think any of us want to age. It's been a challenging confrontation for me, and but it's been a fun ride. And one of the books that I would love to recommend to anyone who's having a challenge with aging is the Crone by, I think her name is Clarissa Pinkas Estola. I'm not sure I'm butchering her name, but The Power of the Crone. So about a year ago, I had my 50th birthday, and it was like overnight. I always have slept really, really well. I've never had a problem sleeping. I've never had pain in my joints except for when I was in my 20s, which was, that's a whole other story. But just like walking around, like I never had like these age-related pains in my joints. And I never had hot flashes, but literally overnight after I turned 50, like I felt like that day I couldn't sleep. I would get up and start to walk and feel like my feet were going to just break underneath me. They hurt. And I was having major hot flashes. Like I felt like I was sitting on the surface of the sun and I was going to blow up. And about 3 months previously, my mom had given me this beautiful gray thoroughbred mare. She was 3 years old at the time. And I had to have the vet out about 3 different occasions, 3 months in a row, because she was colicking, which just is a broad term for stomach upset or some kind of pain in the digestive or abdominal area for the horse. And, these were expensive vet visits. And my mom said to me, I think she's just a pussy and she's having, she's in heat and she's having menstrual pain. And thoroughbreds are sensitive animals. They have very like a thinner skin literally than other horses. And so they can be a little bit more sensitive than other horses. And I asked my vet and they were like, no, she's just constipated. I do feel her follicles she is in heat. They would confirm that, but they would say, no, her follicles aren't much more inflamed than the average horse. But I just trusted that my horse is just sensitive. And so I looked up some different herbs that are used for menstrual pain. And I made a concoction for her of different estrogen and progesterone affecting hormone or herbs, and then also some anti-inflammatory like turmeric and things like that. And I made it for her, never had to have the vet out ever again. She was very moody before that, like they call it being marish. She's never been marish since. She's pretty consistent. She's, happy to have me around and hang out with me on a regular basis. Whereas before she would be like really sweet one day and the next day she didn't want anything to do with me. So it's been a night and day difference with my horse. And so when this happened to me when I turned 50, I was like, let me just put these in some capsules and take them and see what happens. Jessica, overnight, I was sleeping well. I was back to my normal sleep. I didn't have any pain in my feet and my legs when I would walk, and the hot flashes went down by 95%. I might have 1 or 2 hot flashes now during the day, but I don't feel like I'm sitting on the surface of the sun. I just feel like maybe somebody opened the door to the outside and it's summertime air came in. Like I'm not sweating through my clothes, feeling like I have to go take a shower. So it's been a huge difference. And my challenge, I'm still in the product development phase, but my challenge is that I have no problem taking capsules. These are literally horse-sized capsules. They're the biggest capsule because I've found that the quantity of this mixture that I have to take is extensive. So I'm taking 4 really large capsules twice a day. And no big deal for me, but I don't think that that's marketable. So I've been playing around with trying to put it in a tincture. The tincture does work. I made a glycerin-based tincture, so it doesn't have alcohol, so anybody could take it. But same thing, I'm having to take like a tablespoon of it in the morning and at night. And it's fine for me, but I don't think the average person is going to want to taste this. It doesn't taste that great. So I'm kind of still playing with how to get it into a person's body in a more comfortable format, because not everyone is like me. People want easy, simple, tastes good, or a flavor that they can handle. So that's the supplement. I'm also want to create a horse version and market it, because there is a product on the market, but it's just 1 ingredient where mine has 10. And that one's going to be called Miracle Mare. The competing version was Mare Magic. That's the competition. And then I think we'll call the actual herb that I want to put on the market Menopause Miracle. And then I also have some friends who are in their 30s and have dealt with painful periods, and they're trying it out, playing with the mixture, because they don't need as much the estrogen and progesterone modulators, and playing with some different ingredients. So we're kind of toying around, making ourselves some internal science experiments, getting feedback. So if any of your listeners, this is 2023, if any of them are in menopause and want to try it out, I am interested in getting feedback from other people, if it works for them and how many capsules might work for them, knowing that their horse-sized capsules are going to have to take a couple.
Yeah, I think that some people that are struggling through that, and I haven't experienced menopause as of yet, but I think that people that are struggling through that may have exhausted efforts and may be like, I'll take a horse-sized pill, please give me the horse-sized pill, right? So there might be people out there begging and knocking down your door. But yeah, I think it's so beautiful and wonderful that not only are you creating new things to share with the world, new products that are alternatives to pharmaceutical products, but you're also so thoughtful with how you're creating, and you're saying, oh wow, this worked for my horse. Maybe this will work for me. They're all natural ingredients, so why not? Let me try it out. And now you're gathering feedback, which is so, so important. I just love your entrepreneurial spirit, because you're so connected to nature, and you're so connected to spiritual communities and you're so connected to the psychedelic realm, but you're also really grounded on earth and able to run a solid business. And having those two at the same time isn't always possible for everyone. And so I just appreciate that you're here on this earth at this moment in time and that you're able to share these magical gifts with everyone, because it's so needed. And I've already told you once, and I'll tell you again, that the second that I'm pregnant, I'm calling you, because you are going to be my doula mama baby like lady that I call for advice on in every step of the way, because you're also a mom. We haven't even talked about that, but yeah, full trust from this end, and thank you for being a creator, because it's something that not a lot of people want to play in that space. It's a tough space to play in. Supplements that's a hard space. And I think that I've been in circles where you've asked a few other business folks that are in that same realm, like, hey, how did you do this? Or how did you do that? And a lot of people are telling you, like, this is hard. This is really hard. Expect no's, right? And when you hear that over and over and over again, but you keep going because it's a calling of your heart, I know that there's going to be so much light at the end of that hard work. So just want to say I'm so appreciative and keep going. And I'm happy to air this podcast and spread the message far and wide. Thank
you.
Before we tell everyone where they can find you and all those good things, I did want to touch on one more topic, because you mentioned your really intuition in terms of your relationship with your horse and being able to like really feel the vibe of like, hey, maybe the horse needs this. And something that has really resonated with me recently is your connection to birds and connection to flying creatures of all sorts. Because I've had a few visions in cacao ceremony and in breath work where I'm seeing different types of birds that have come to me. And you on your farm have had a really deep connection with, I believe it's a hawk. And I just wanted to talk to you about that and how that connection formed and what that sacred connection looks like for you.
Yeah. The hawk. I just noticed everything that you've mentioned, that you've asked me about, are just things that I've stumbled into. They weren't anything that I consciously set out. Like, they were just problems that I had that I have my eyes open for a solution, and it just presented itself. And I noticed, along with being connected to the property, that there were more red-shouldered hawks on our property than outside of the property. And I gathered this by taking hikes where, like I mentioned, we're right next to a state forest. We have 27,000 acres right out the back of our property. And when I would go out in the woods, there were hawks there, but I didn't hear them or see them at the quantity that I did on our property. And just out of the blue, one day I was in ceremony with ayahuasca, and she says to me very loud and clear, make friends with the hawk. Not a lot of words, just make friends with the hawk. And I was like, how am I going to do that? And it's like, there's that part of me that was asking, but then when I heard the answer, will you feed him? I was like, oh, duh. That's how you do it. It's like that Jane's Addiction song. If you want a friend, or feed any animal. And so I went to the local pet store and I got a couple cute little fuzzy white mice, and I had them with me in not little, but like a big plastic clear tub. And I played with them and I love them. And it was about 2 weeks later, I was listening to a Jordan Peterson podcast, and actually it was one of his books, 12 Rules for Life or something like that. And he talks about sacrifice and how sometimes in life we have to make sacrifices. And I kind of had gotten to the point where I was like, this hawk is not going to show up. I've been carrying these mice around with me for 2 weeks, calling the hawk. And his name is Gavi Yao, which is Portuguese for hawk. And this was also another piece of the puzzles. Prior to ayahuasca telling me this, I was in Brazil. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent. I was in Brazil, and I was sitting with one of the leaders of the UDV church, and he starts singing this song in Portuguese that I don't understand the words. All of the songs he sang were in Portuguese. I didn't understand any of the words to any of them, except this one. There was something in my energy field, in my consciousness, that was like, I need to know what that song is. I don't know what he's singing, but I can feel that there's power, and I need to know what the song is. And so I asked him later, and he said, oh, that's a song about the Hawk King. And the hawk, the Gavião Rei, is an animal that they call upon when they're brewing their medicine in the UDV tradition. And so he sent me the Icaro, the Chamada, as they call it in the UDV church, the sound, and he gave it to me to sing in our ceremonies. And so I had been singing the song of the hawk in ceremony, and that was when ayahuasca said, make friends with him. And so I'm carrying these mice around, and about 2 weeks later, I'm just like, this is never going to happen. And I just decided to keep the mice as pets, and I named them Tick and Tack, Tic Tac. And the very day that I named them, the hawk finally came down and got them. And he swooped into the big plastic tub and he took them. And I was so sad because now I had developed an attachment. Basically, it actually became a sacrifice. That
bringing
like,
it back around to that sacrifice. No.
Yes.
Bye, Tick and Tack.
Yes. And so I began to feed him little pieces of chicken, and I would put it up on the pergola, and he would sit in this tree, and I would just contemplate and meditate with him. And it took a long time for him to trust me. It took patience. And I hope to write a book at some point, in the next year or so, about, and it's going to be titled Lessons of the Hawk, because this has been a 3-year relationship with him. I have had the honor and the privilege of watching him feed his babies, watching him mate with his mate for life. We call her MG, Mama Gavião. He's OG, original Gavião. And then we have BG, Baby Gavião. And I've watched 3 successions of families that he's created, and it's always the same female, the same male. And the lessons have ranged everywhere from patience to trust to perseverance, like, especially like, I've been married for 13 years, and sometimes relationships are hard, and you have those thoughts. Sometimes it's like, ugh, what do I do here? And every time I would offer a mouse or a piece of chicken, every single time I always ask, what is the lesson you have for me today? Very often it was the same lesson: patience, patience, patience. And then sometimes I would just hear a different word. And one day I heard the word stay. And I wasn't really thinking of leaving, but it was like, you're not going anywhere. This is Hawk's mate for life. You're in this relationship, and stay, they're good and the bad. So there just were so many messages and lessons that I've learned. One of the biggest lessons had to do with my daughter. And in doing my research about hawks, I learned that 80% of baby hawks that actually are raised and survive and actually fly from the nest, 80% don't make it, because now that they're on their own, there isn't enough to sustain them. So once this hawk pair has taught the baby how to hunt and said, okay, now you're off on your own, go find your own territory, only 20% make it. And that was quite a number for me to wrap my head around, and to really contemplate what that must be like as an animal, to know that the majority of all this work that you're doing isn't going to result in anything long lasting. And my daughter went off to Germany last year, and she graduated high school, valedictorian of her school. I'm super proud of her. And she went to Germany to spend a gap year. And I was depressed. It was like this empty nest syndrome began to kind of creep up on me. And I did a ceremony, and I was like, what do I do with this? I'm just like, I wanted to hold her. I wanted to possess her. I wanted to keep her. And that I couldn't, it just hurt. And I remember we have this couch outside that faces the tree where the hawk sits. And I would just sit on this couch and contemplate what he's teaching me. And he's just sitting there looking at me, swiveling his head back and forth, just kind of like looking at me, talking to me. And he reminded me that I let my babies go. And I know and I trust that whatever happens to them is what's meant to happen for them. And so it actually was the hawk that allowed me to just let go and let her fly and trust that she'll be okay. And then I did have a dream that she was back at college here in Florida and that everything was going to be fine. So I was able to kind of like project that as my prophetic future, whether it's true or not. But she's back home. She's good. But there just have been so many things that this hawk has taught me. And the most recent lesson that the hawk taught me is letting go. And I had a period in July after he raised this last batch of babies, and I would call him and I sing my song, and almost all the time he comes and he sits on this tree and he's like, okay, here I am. And I would put the mouse or the chicken on my gauntlet, on my glove, and he would swoop down. Eventually he learned to trust me to where he would come and he would fly and take this food off of my hand. And there was about 3 weeks where he didn't come. Mama didn't come. Nobody came. And I have these mice in these cages and they're breeding. And I'm like, I'm going to be overrun by mice if this hawk doesn't come and take these mice. And I just felt in my bones that it was the end of the mice, that I needed to stop keeping these mice. And I didn't feel guilty for feeding the mice to the hawk because that was one of the lessons, because I was feeling guilty for a while. And I would feel this guilt. And one day I asked, what is the lesson? And the hawk said, nature doesn't feel guilt. Nature doesn't feel guilt. And so I was like, wow, okay, this little baby mice, this little teeny mice is going to go and have a different chapter, have a different incarnation, have a different life. And so not feeling guilty. But I was beginning to feel guilty about them living in a cage. And even though I try to keep it clean and have little toys in there and make it a nice life for them, it wasn't something that was going to go on indefinitely. And so about 3 weeks went by, no hawks, and I was facilitating a ceremony, and I kind of got this message very clear, like that's the end of an era, letting go of this relationship with this hawk in the way that it looks currently, and feed him the rest of the mice and then be done with it. The very next day, he shows up. He swooped me. I didn't even call him. He like swooped me and landed on the tree. And it took about a month of feeding him the last of the mice. And in my cedar dieta, I brought the mice out with me into the forest and got some great video of the last mice that he would be eating. So I may feed him some chicken going forward, but it's different, and I think that there's a beautiful lesson there of non-attachment, that I want to keep this hawk wild. I never wanted to feed him more than a mouse a day. I wanted to make sure that he still hunted for himself and could sustain himself. So letting go, and some relationships come and then some relationships go. And so I don't know what the future looks like with the hawk. Maybe we'll feed him a piece of chicken here and there, but it's different. So yeah, thanks for asking.
Wow, thank you for sharing all of that. Like part of me had chills when you were talking, because some of those lessons are lessons that sometimes people take a lifetime to learn. And for you to have these beautiful insights from this relationship over 3 years is incredible. And one thing that I wanted to just call out that you mentioned was when that voice came to you and said, stay, like stay in the hard shit. Like, and in particular, like when you're going through something tough with relationship, but also like, I think we tend to want to fold if things go wrong or things get tough. And, I can relate to that experience that you're talking about because my partner and I have been together for in various different morphs of our relationship for over 15 years. And to be in partnership with somebody for that long is very hard. And it's not always talked about. The hard times aren't always shown. In fact,
right.
Almost never shown because we've been taught that the facade is supposed to be this perfect thing on the outside, like, ooh, couple goals, right? And
yeah, nobody's posting they had a fight with their spouse on Instagram.
We had this horrible fight. Let me tell you about it. And maybe that's what we need to do, but I think that's such an important message that most people don't learn within their entire lifetime. But then you also got that important message of letting go and also sacrifice. And that's a huge part of the human experience. And then also feeling guilt. I love that the message was that, nature doesn't feel that, because I've always felt like we're the aliens here. Like we're the ones that have these like odd brain functions that the rest of the planet doesn't really experience in the same way, with the exception of, dolphins or a few other animals. And so it's so important to look to that experience to say, oh, that experience might be completely different than what I'm imposing upon it. And the guilt that I'm feeling or the shame that I'm feeling in any area of life. So thank you for those insights and
You're welcome.
and for sharing your beautiful connection to this hawk and the ceremony in creating that connection and then the ceremony in letting go of that connection too. I feel like we've talked about a lot. We've gotten a lot of goodness. For those of you who don't already know, my husband and I own a coffee company called Gay Head Coffee. And of course, we drink our own coffee every day, and it's some of the most flavorful and inviting coffee, especially with the nostalgia of coming from a can rather than paper or plastic packaging. But I'm biased, so check it out for yourself. If you're interested, head over to the show notes where you will find a link to order your coffee today from gayheadcoffee.com. That's GAYHEADCOFFEE.com. Thank you all for your support. It means the world to us as a small business. Is there anything else you're feeling called to share before we close this container of a conversation?
Yeah. There's one thing that came up that I think that is kind of novel that I think needs to be shared with the world. And it's around the birth doula aspect of my life. And one of the trips that I took to Brazil, I asked the leader of the UDV church, who do I stay with? And he said, stay with this couple. And they run an eco tour. It's very authentic. And it's called Amazon Emotions, if anybody's interested in going with them. It's not your typical eco lodge where you have a bunch of people staying there. It's a very small private group, and they're really in the heart of virgin Amazon forest. And it's a husband and a wife, and they have 3 kids. And she was telling me over breakfast one day that she birthed all of her children on ayahuasca on the veranda of their home that is open to the Amazon. And at that point, I'd only had really difficult experiences with ayahuasca. And I was like, no fucking way could I ever even conceive of drinking ayahuasca, combining that with the challenge of childbirth. But it began to percolate in me. And she said, it's not what you think it is, that ayahuasca has a different intention with childbirth. And my experience, as she related to me, was that she said I could connect to my unborn child and I could communicate with them and I could work together with them, with the contractions, with the flow, and harmoniously work together to progress through this birth ceremony, this labor experience, and that the medicine actually worked with her to calm her body, kind of like we were talking about with the microdose tincture, like that warm hug, just a settling of the body and allowing all of the body to open and relax, and that intuition, that channel opening up where we could receive that divine guidance of what to do and how to be and how to breathe moment by moment by moment. And so that was about 7 years ago. And over this period of time, it's begun to present itself to me, where one of my best friends had a baby a few years ago, and she said, I know that this is something that you heard about and I want to try it. And then somebody else would reach out, and just as a birth doula, because I was a birth doula too, and she said, what do you have that can help me relax in ceremony? And she had drank ayahuasca, and I was like, just my intuition pinged ayahuasca. And I was like, I feel like I'm called to tell you this. And so little by little, I kept getting these opportunities to bring ayahuasca into the birth space, to give it to the mom, to give it to the father, to give it to the kids, the siblings that are there. Obviously, different setting, different dosing. We're not giving them, 1 to 2 ounces of medicine, because their body, the mother's body's already sensitive and open and very heightened awareness. We call it labor land. It's almost like you're on psychedelics already. But the effect has been profound. The effect has been profound. We've had women who were not progressing in labor, who were like, no, I don't want any of the ayahuasca. So I offer either the full sacrament that has the DMT in it or the tincture that doesn't. And they were like, no, I don't want either, even though they had said before that they did, go in. It's like, she's like, now that she's in the experience, no, I don't want it. And then as she's not progressing, she's like, okay, I'll just try, kind of like you, like, I'll just try 1 drop. So giving her just 1 drop under the tongue of just the vine only. 6 hours later, she had her baby. And she didn't think she was progressing, but we checked her, the midwife checked her, and she was ready to go. And just the feedback in these situations of how calm and relaxed it helped them to feel, of how sacred they began to recognize this experience was, versus just like this physical thing that they had to endure and get through, that they could now just rest and settle into the experience and enjoy and appreciate every moment of it from a different perspective. So just like to throw that out there, that this is, I think, maybe one of the ways that we birth in the future is by bringing low dose psychedelics into the birth space to help facilitate a trauma-free birth. Because I see so many people come into ayahuasca ceremony and heal on a birth trauma that they were unaware of. So what if we could prevent that birth trauma and never have it happen in the first place, through bringing consciousness and sacredness into that ceremonial space?
Well, first of all, thank you for being an innovator in that space and taking some of those learnings from different cultures and countries and bringing them back and really integrating them into your life experiences as you see fit. And I completely trust that you're doing that in a way that is harmonious with the person that you're working with. I have a question for you here. Why would you utilize something like ayahuasca and not utilize some other types of plant medicine that are out there? Or what would be the, like, has that like crossed your mind at all to say, oh, well, ayahuasca could help with this. What about psilocybin? What about these other things? And what would be the, like, I guess I don't know enough about it, so that's why I'm asking. And obviously it came in very clear for you in that person that had experience with it. But I'm just curious if people are hearing this and they're like, oh, wow, that sounds interesting. But what about this other plant medicine for birthing? What would that look like?
That's a great question. I can't honestly say from experience that using psilocybin in birth looks like this, or using LSD in birth looks like this. The first thing I would say is that it is natural, and that you can have just the vine only. So if there was a mom or a family that wanted to try it but didn't want to have a psychedelic experience, there's that piece of it. The other thing that I've noticed just in the everyday population, with one of the big differences between microdosing psilocybin or LSD and ayahuasca, is that the former, psilocybin and LSD, can kind of sometimes create more anxiety. It can create tension. It can create kind of a speedy, amped feeling. Whereas ayahuasca does not do that. It's very calming, very grounding and relaxing, and has a very clear, heart opening result. So I think that when you were talking about your experience with the microdose, one of the things that happened is there was a heart opening where you had that channel now that your brain could receive the messages from the heart, where normally it was just like, my brain's thinking this, but your heart's like, no, this is okay. And so I think that that's a big difference. Sometimes people might have a heart opening on psilocybin or LSD, but maybe not quite as strong or guaranteed as with ayahuasca. And then you have cannabis, which certainly could be used in the birth ceremony. It is an anesthetic, it is a painkiller. So maybe that or CBD on a low level could be beneficial. So it's not that these other things can't be used. This is just how it came to me. And I also think that the indigenous and the Brazilian cultures have many, many years of testing, on themselves. And so it has been done generationally for a very long time. So we're not saying, hey, let's give you MDMA in your birth ceremony and see how it goes, So we know that it's safe. We know that it's been done, and we know that it works. So maybe that's why that came to me. But a great, really great question.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. And another question I have that, people that aren't familiar with the tincture or with ayahuasca may be curious as to like how that might impact baby in your womb. What are the impacts? Obviously, this has been done for thousands of years in different cultures, new to Western culture. As far as I haven't heard this being used before. So I'm curious on that piece of it and what the impacts are to the baby, if the baby is actually having some sort of an experience, or, I don't know if there's any way for us to know that, but just a question that popped into my head.
Yeah, great question. I would imagine the baby absolutely, probably, definitely is experiencing something. And if I were to map my own experience with ayahuasca onto baby, it would be that warm hug from grandma that says, it's okay, you can relax. It's just go with the flow. Mama's got you. It's all going to be okay. And then the other side, that's if you're just using the vine. Then if you're using the full sacrament that does have DMT in it, our bodies secrete massive quantities of DMT when we're born and when we die. And they call it the spirit molecule, in that this is the God molecule that kind of transports us into these different dimensions as we're coming into this, plane, and as we're leaving this plane. So it's theorized. I don't know about the science. I was taking a blood sample of a baby when they're born, but I don't know the details of that, so don't quote me. But the idea is that baby already has DMT in their system, and that they are already experiencing this full interdimensional experience as they're going through that birth process. And just from reports of mom, very calming, very relaxing. So I do think that it does cross the blood-brain barrier. I do think that baby experiences this, and I would imagine with the same neurological system that they're probably having the same calming, relaxing, pain relieving type of experience as mom does.
It's like a baby coming out of a sweat lodge.
Yes.
Coming out the womb. Here we go. Oh, you know what's
Circling
funny?
back to the sweat lodge.
Exactly. And I do have another question, but it's funny because when I was thinking about like, oh, baby coming out of the sweat lodge, I just think back to when Wyra was talking about the sweat lodge ceremony, and she said that culturally in Ecuador, at least, she said that moms would take their babies into the sweat lodge ceremonies with them. And so I just wanted to kind of plop that because I think that it's so relevant for some of these ancient, just like ceremony and wisdom that we've lost, just to be remembered into our space, like maybe from lifetimes ago, but certainly not in our Western culture. Some cultures have been able to keep that spark alive, but I think that, when some of us heard that, we were like, oh, well, then we have to stay in the sweat lodge. We can't leave if moms take their babies in here. Like, if babies are coming in here, I'm going to stay. Like, it was that plus Ken. Like, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I was like,
and then she said grandmas. She said moms,
Yep.
babies, and grandmas, like the elderly. And I was like, oh, wow.
I'm like, all right, well.
She said, your body knows what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my last question, because as you know, I am a breathwork facilitator. I love breathwork. And it's been one of the tools that I've used to not only heal my own self, but to bring me into different levels of consciousness. And as you're talking through this, doula experience, Iowa doula, I don't even know what to call it. I was also thinking about breathwork in that experience as well, and how powerful it would be from a birthing experience. And there is birth breath, there is who whatever that they teach in the classes, but to have a full big breathwork ceremony to help with labor could be something that's really powerful, and I hadn't thought about it before. So you're planting seeds as you speak. But one thing I just wanted to,
that might be a whole other market for you to just kind of play with moms and
if anyone's willing, because
shamanic breath work.
Absolutely. But it's one of those things that you have to be really careful, because even in my release form, it says that, if you're pregnant, it's a contraindication for doing breath work. And there's liability there, but there's liability in walking out of your house every day as well. So that's a whole another vein we could go down. But I want to say thank you so much for coming into my life, for being a grounded, roots into the earth and arms stretched up to heaven person for me to look at in reverence, as somebody who is an inspiration for not only walking a spiritual path and also an entrepreneurial path, but somebody who is inspiring from the essence of just who you are, how you walk in the world, and how you carry yourself in this life. So thank you for being that. Thank you for just coming and saying yes to chatting with me and being a really good friend, and talking on the phone and talking about all the things and not being afraid to peel another layer back, because we get into some deep conversations and I'm here for it. So thank you. I also wanted to make sure that everyone listening knows where to find your farm and knows where to find all of the goodness of your tinctures that we talked about, and some of your other products as well. Where can people find you?
Yeah. And thank you for seeing me. Thank you for witnessing. Thank you. We are a small private plant medicine church here in Brooksville, Florida. So we're about an hour north of Tampa on the west central Gulf Coast of Florida, and up against 27,000 acres of forest. So a beautiful location. Our website is greatspiritfarm.org, and they can reach us through our website if they want to get in touch with us. And then also on our website, all of our tinctures are there. We make shakapas, we paint drums. We have a lot of different offerings on the website. So feel free to check that out. And yeah.
Thank you, Shannon. So much love to you. So much love
Thank you,
to
Jessica.
Great Spirit Farm too. It looks beautiful. Can't wait to visit. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Can't wait to have you. Love you.
Bye, love.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me.